Another day, another conquered species to catalog. Senior Archivist Krex'tal of the Vorthak Dominion's Central Intelligence Bureau stared at the datapad floating before his 6 eyes, each one rolling in perfect synchronization. Oh, wonderful! Just absolutely thrilling. Assignment number 4612. Compile historical records of the recently subjugated planet designated as Earth. The blue marble spinning lazily on his holographic display looked about as threatening as a soap bubble. Krex'tal's mandibles clicked in what passed for a chuckle among his species. These humans, as they called themselves, had surrendered faster than a Galonian slime worm in a salt storm. 3 days. 3 whole days of token resistance before their entire planetary government rolled over like trained pets. Pathetic, really. The Vorthak Dominion had been perfecting the art of galactic conquest for over 2 millennia. 847 worlds now bowed before their military might. Not once, not ever, had they encountered a species capable of mounting anything resembling effective resistance. The mathematical precision of their war machine was a thing of beauty. Scout, analyze, overwhelm, subjugate, rinse and repeat across the galaxy. And now, these bipedal, hairless apes with their laughably primitive technology thought they deserved a place in the official records alongside civilizations that had at least put up a decent fight. Krex'tal's neural cluster throbbed with irritation. The humans hadn't even managed to damage a single Dominion vessel during their so-called defense of their homeworld. Still, orders were orders. High Command wanted a complete historical analysis of every conquered species, no matter how insignificant. Something about understanding cultural patterns to prevent future uprisings. As if these soft-skinned creatures could organize anything more dangerous than a food riot. Krex'tal activated his workstation with a resigned sigh that sounded like steam escaping from a broken valve. Time to wade through another collection of primitive tribal conflicts and territorial squabbles. With any luck, he could finish this tedious assignment before his next rest cycle and move on to cataloging something actually interesting. Like watching paint oxidize on the hull of a cargo freighter. The first few entries in Earth's military database were exactly what Krex'tal had expected. Primitive beings hitting each other with sticks. How delightfully predictable. He skimmed through records of early human warfare with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Stone axes, bronze spears, iron swords, each technological advancement separated by centuries of sluggish progress. Oh, how terrifying, Krex'tal muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he watched holographic recreations of ancient battles. Look out, Galaxy. They've learned to sharpen metal. But then something odd caught his attention. A pattern that made his primary brain stem twitch with confusion. These humans, they were not just fighting for resources or territory like every other species the Dominion had catalogued. No, these creatures seemed to fight for the pure, unadulterated joy of it. Every single page of their history was soaked in blood. Not occasional conflicts over scarce resources, but constant, relentless, never-ending warfare. Tribe against tribe. Kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation. They fought over land, gold, religion, politics, and sometimes, apparently just because it was Tuesday. Krex'tal's mandibles stopped clicking. This was not normal behavior for a species that had achieved planetary dominance. Most civilizations settled into peaceful coexistence once they eliminated external threats. What, these humans? They created new threats just to keep the party going. Then he found the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartan warriors. 300? Against an army of over 100,000 Persian soldiers. The mathematical impossibility of it made Krex'tal's analytical processors stutter like a damaged quantum computer. Any rational species would have surrendered immediately, negotiated terms, lived to fight another day when the odds were less suicidal. Not humans. They stood their ground for 3 days, killing thousands of enemies before finally falling. The historical record showed they knew they were going to die. They prepared for death. They welcomed it. Some lunatic named Leonidas actually told his men to come back with your shields or on them. Impossible, Krex'tal whispered, his secondary eyes focusing on the casualty reports. No species develops this level of tactical stubbornness without being eliminated by natural selection. Yet here was the evidence, recorded in meticulous detail by the humans themselves. They did not just survive these impossible battles, they celebrated them. They turned them into stories, songs, cultural touchstones that inspired future generations to attempt equally suicidal military adventures. Krex'tal's confidence began to crack like ice under pressure. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to these hairless apes than met the eye. What happened next made Krex'tal question everything he thought he knew about rational behavior. The human timeline accelerated into what they called modern warfare, and the numbers started climbing in ways that defied all logic. Wars that lasted years, involving entire continents, with casualty counts that made his neural processors ache. The First World War, 16 million dead. The Second World War, 75 million casualties. 75 million. Krex'tal had to run the calculation 3 times before his brain accepted the data. In a single conflict, these humans had managed to kill more of their own species than most civilizations lost in their entire recorded history. "This cannot be accurate," he muttered, cross-referencing the data with multiple sources. But every database confirmed the same impossible truth. Humans had industrialized warfare, turning killing into a science with the same methodical precision the Vorthak Dominion used for mining asteroids. Then he found the nuclear weapons. Krex'tal's 6 eyes widened until they threatened to pop out of his skull like overripe fruit. These maniacs had not just discovered atomic energy, they had immediately weaponized it. And then, in a display of cosmic insanity that made his mandibles lock in horror, they had actually used it on themselves, twice. "They obliterated their own cities," he whispered, his voice cracking like a pubescent teenager. "They vaporized hundreds of thousands of their own kind to end a war faster." But the real nightmare was what came next. The Cold War era revealed a level of strategic thinking that made Krex'tal's advanced intellect feel like a malfunctioning calculator. These humans had built enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet multiple times over. Not once, not twice, but dozens of times. They had pointed these planet-killing devices at each other for decades, playing a game of cosmic chicken that could have ended all life on their world. And they called it mutually assured destruction with the casual tone of someone discussing lunch plans. "Insane," Krex'tal breathed, his respiratory system struggling to process the implications. "They are absolutely, completely, certifiably insane." But the humans were not finished surprising him. The Vietnam War records showed something that made his analytical processors shut down and restart twice. The most technologically advanced military force on Earth, armed with superior firepower, advanced aircraft, and overwhelming numerical advantage, had been defeated by farmers hiding in tunnels and swamps. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics. The Vietnamese had turned their own disadvantages into weapons, using knowledge of local terrain, patience, and sheer bloody-minded determination to outlast a superpower. They had won by refusing to fight fair, by making victory so costly that their enemies simply gave up and went home. Krex'tal's mandibles began clicking rapidly, a nervous habit he had developed during his academy days. A horrible realization was creeping through his consciousness like poison through his circulatory system. Every conflict in human history was not just random violence. It was research and development, trial and error, beta testing for the ultimate military challenge. They had spent thousands of years perfecting every possible form of warfare. Ground combat, naval battles, aerial superiority, psychological operations, economic warfare, guerrilla tactics, urban fighting, siege warfare, and weapons of mass destruction. They had practiced against enemies who knew their weaknesses, spoke their languages, and understood their strategies. And now, after millennia of this endless, brutal education, they had finally encountered their ultimate opponent, alien invaders from space. Every science fiction story, every military simulation, every strategic planning session in human history had been preparation for exactly this scenario. The Vorthak Dominion had not conquered Earth. They had walked into the galaxy's most elaborate military training program and announced themselves as the final exam. Krex'tal's secondary brain began shutting down non-essential functions as the full scope of the situation became clear. These humans had not surrendered out of weakness. They had surrendered because they wanted to study their enemies up close. Panic clawed at Krex'tal's consciousness like a wild animal trying to escape a cage. His trembling appendages frantically accessed the human entertainment databases, hoping against hope that their recreational activities would prove them to be the simple, pleasure-seeking creatures he desperately needed them to be. What he found instead made his sanity pack its bags and head for the nearest exit. Movies. Thousands upon thousands of movies about warfare. Not just historical conflicts, but fictional wars against alien invaders. Independence Day, War of the Worlds, District 9, Starship Troopers, Ender's Game. Humans had spent decades imagining every possible scenario of extraterrestrial conquest and developing countermeasures through mass entertainment. They turned preparation into recreation. Krex'tal wheezed, his voice boxes producing sounds that resembled a dying air conditioning unit. They have been war-gaming alien invasion scenarios for fun. But the movies were just the beginning. Video games revealed a level of strategic obsession that made Krex'tal's professional military analysts look like amateur enthusiasts. Command and Conquer, StarCraft, Total War, Civilization. Millions of humans had spent countless hours mastering resource management, tactical deployment, and strategic planning in simulated warfare environments. They had gamified military science. Chess, poker, Risk, Monopoly, even their board games were exercises in tactical thinking, resource allocation, and psychological warfare. Human children learned strategic concepts before they could properly tie their shoes. Their entire culture was one massive, multi-generational military academy disguised as entertainment. Krex'tal's primary visual sensor began twitching uncontrollably as he accessed their literature databases. Science fiction novels by the thousands, each one exploring different aspects of interstellar conflict. They had written detailed analyses of space combat, examined the logistics of planetary invasion, and theorized about the psychology of alien species. H.G. Wells had predicted their tactics centuries before the Dominion arrived. Robert Heinlein had outlined military doctrine for fighting bugs from space. Orson Scott Card had explored the ethical implications of xenocide. These were not just stories. They were strategic planning documents. His communication device began flashing urgent priority signals, but Krex'tal ignored them. He was too busy having what his species politely called a complete neurological reorganization event and other species called a total mental breakdown. The device kept chirping until his supervisor's voice cut through his panic like a plasma torch through butter. Krex'tal, where is your preliminary report on the human archives? High Command is expecting updates on all recent acquisitions. Yaxandra's tone carried the casual authority of someone who had never doubted the Dominion's supremacy. Yet, Supervisor Krex'tal managed, his voice cracking like thin ice. We have a critical intelligence failure. The humans, they are not what we thought they were. Oh, for the love of the eternal void, what now? Did they have slightly more advanced metallurgy than expected? Some primitive chemical explosives we missed? They have been preparing for galactic warfare for their entire civilization, Krex'tal blurted out. Every aspect of their culture is military training in disguise. Their entertainment, their games, their literature, everything. They have spent thousands of years studying how to fight alien invaders. Silence stretched across the communication channel like a taut cable about to snap. Krex'tal, report to medical immediately. You are clearly suffering from archive psychosis. Too much exposure to primitive cultures can cause. Supervisor, please access the files I am transmitting. Section 7, Alpha 9. Human Entertainment Analysis. More silence. Then the sound of Yaxandra's breathing apparatus working overtime. This cannot be accurate. These casualty figures for their internal conflicts. It gets worse, Supervisor. Much worse. The communication channel filled with the sound of Yaxandra's mandibles clicking at hypersonic frequencies as she absorbed the data. When she finally spoke again, her voice had lost all its previous confidence. Schedule an emergency meeting with High Command. Priority level extinction event. We may have made a terrible mistake. The war room of the Vorthak High Command had never seen this level of panic. General Moxran, veteran of 400 successful planetary conquests, sat at the head of the tactical table while his mandibles ground together like malfunctioning machinery. Around him, the Dominion's finest military minds stared at holographic displays showing Earth's data with the expression of beings who had just realized they were standing in a minefield. Let me understand this correctly, General Moxran began, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom. We have conquered a species that has spent its entire evolutionary period perfecting the art of warfare. And we did not notice this until after we occupied their planet. Chief Analyst QX Mira activated her presentation with appendages that shook like leaves in a hurricane. Sir, the data suggests that humans do not fight for survival or resources like every other species we have encountered. They fight for entertainment, for ideology, for practice, and sometimes simply because they are bored. The holographic display showed a bewildering array of human activities. Boxing matches where individuals beat each other unconscious for the amusement of crowds. Football games that resembled military formations clashing on a battlefield. Mixed martial arts competitions that were barely contained gladiatorial combat. Their recreational activities are combat training, QX Mira continued, her voice cracking with stress. What they call sports are actually exercises in tactical movement, strategic thinking, and violence management. They have turned warfare into a spectator event. General Moxran's primary brain cluster began producing warning signals. Show me their weapons development history. The next series of images made the entire room fall silent. Humans had weaponized everything. Literally everything. They had turned space itself into a weapon with orbital bombardment platforms. They had weaponized weather with cloud seeding and atmospheric manipulation. They had weaponized diseases with biological warfare programs. They had weaponized mathematics with cyber warfare and information attacks. They created computer viruses, strategic analyst Texander reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. Humans developed weapons that attack the minds of machines. They have been preparing for electronic warfare against species they had never met. But the revelation that shattered what remained of their confidence came from intelligence specialist Nexvora. Generals, I have analyzed their educational systems. Human children are required to study military history as part of their basic education. They learn about warfare with the same systematic approach that our younglings learn mathematics and science. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as the implications sank in. Every human who surrendered to our forces, Nexvora continued, has received mandatory education in tactical analysis, historical battle strategies, and the psychological principles of warfare. Their entire population consists of amateur military theorists. General Moxran stood up so quickly that his chair overturned with a crash that echoed through the chamber. Are you telling me that we have been treating trained military analysts as civilian prisoners? Worse, sir, came the response from Communications Officer Xandra. I have been monitoring their surrender negotiations. The speed and efficiency of their capitulation was unprecedented. No species in Dominion history has ever organized a planetary surrender so quickly or so completely. The general's eyes widened with dawning horror. Strategic deception. It appears so, sir. They wanted us to occupy their planet. Every human facility we have inspected has been meticulously documented and catalogued. They are studying our technology, our tactics, our command structure, and our weaknesses while we congratulate ourselves on an easy victory. Chief Analyst QX Mira activated another display that showed human prisoner behavior in Dominion facilities. Instead of the expected demoralization and despair, the humans were asking questions. Lots of questions. About ship design, about communication systems, about supply chains, about everything. "They are conducting intelligence-gathering operations while pretending to be defeated," she reported. "Every human in our custody is a potential spy, analyst, or saboteur. We have essentially given them complete access to our military infrastructure." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of General Max Rand's breathing apparatus working overtime. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of 8 centuries of military tradition crumbling into dust. "Signal all fleet commanders. Priority Alpha Directive. We need to reassess our entire occupation strategy immediately. And someone find out if any of our other conquered worlds have been asking as many questions as the humans." The meeting dissolved into chaos as officers scrambled to implement damage control measures. But deep in the back of every mind present was the same terrifying thought. If Earth was not a conquest but a trap, what exactly were the humans planning to do with everything they had learned? The answer came 3 hours later when communications officer Zexandra burst into the command center with her appendages trembling like seismic sensors during a planetary earthquake. "General Max Rand, we have intercepted human transmissions. You need to see this immediately." The holographic display flickered to life, showing decoded messages between human resistance cells that should not have existed, should not have been possible. The Dominion's occupation forces had reported complete pacification of the human population. Priority transmission from Liberation Command to all embedded assets, the translation software announced in cheerful tones that made everyone's blood freeze. Phase 1 complete. Vorthak military capabilities fully documented. Technological acquisition successful. Initiate Phase 2 on schedule. General Max Rand's mandibles locked in a rictus of pure horror. Liberation Command? Embedded assets? What embedded assets? Zexandra's voice cracked like breaking glass. "Sir, it appears that every human cooperation with our occupation forces was coordinated from a central command structure. Their surrender was not capitulation. It was the opening move in a strategic operation." The next transmission made the temperature in the room plummet to Arctic levels. Engineering teams report successful reverse engineering of Vorthak FTL drives, weapon systems, and communication arrays. Prototypes testing at 115% of original efficiency. Humans have been improving our own technology. "Impossible," General Max Rand whispered, but his protests sounded hollow even to his own auditory sensors. "Our technology is centuries ahead of their primitive." "Sir," interrupted intelligence specialist Nexvora, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am receiving reports from all 847 conquered worlds simultaneously. Human resistance cells are activating across the entire Dominion." The tactical display exploded into chaos as red warning indicators appeared like a plague across the galactic map. Every world, every system, every outpost that the Vorthak Dominion had conquered over the past 2 millennia was suddenly reporting coordinated uprisings. "How is this possible?" Max Rand demanded. "Humans have only been in our territory for 3 months. Sir, analysis suggests that humans have been infiltrating our conquered territories for years before we ever encountered Earth. They have been studying us, preparing for this moment, positioning assets throughout our empire while we believed them to be a primitive, isolated species." The final intercepted transmission was delivered in a voice that somehow managed to sound both polite and absolutely terrifying. "All units, this is Admiral Sarah Blake of the Human Expeditionary Force. The Vorthak Dominion has graciously provided us with detailed intelligence on their military capabilities, technological specifications, and strategic weaknesses. We thank them for their cooperation in this endeavor. Operation Checkmate is now active. Let's show these wannabe conquerors how real warfare is conducted." The silence that followed was the sound of an empire realizing it had been outmaneuvered by a species it had dismissed as primitive. The Vorthak Dominion, master of 847 worlds, victor in 10,000 conflicts, it had been played like a simple musical instrument by beings they had considered barely worthy of notice. General Max Rand stared at the tactical display as it showed the systematic collapse of his civilization's greatest achievement. The humans had not been conquered. They had been studying, learning, planning. While the Dominion played checkers with overwhelming force, humanity had been playing four-dimensional chess with strategic deception. Sir, Zixandra reported, her voice heavy with the weight of impending doom. Fleet Command is requesting immediate evacuation protocols. The humans are not just using our own weapons against us. They are using them better than we do. The Vorthak Dominion was about to learn that there is a vast difference between conquering a species and conquering humanity. The end came faster than anyone thought possible. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy like an avalanche of military disasters. Fleet Admiral Vexnal from the Outer Rim reported his entire armada destroyed by modified Vorthak weapons that fired with twice the power and 3 times the accuracy of the originals. Commander Yixandra from the core world sent frantic transmissions about human-led uprisings using improved Dominion technology before her signals cut to static. Every conquered world was erupting simultaneously. The slaves that the Dominion had gathered from 847 species were being organized, trained, and equipped by human resistance cells that materialized out of nowhere like ghosts becoming solid. 2 millennia of careful conquest was unraveling in a matter of hours. Krex'tal sat in his archive chamber, watching the holographic displays that showed the systematic collapse of everything his species had built. The irony was so bitter he could taste it through his respiratory filters. The Vorthak Dominion, the galaxy's supreme military power, was being destroyed by a species they had catalogued as harmless primitives with limited strategic value. His final log entry would be brief. Personal Archive, Senior Archivist Krex'tal, Day 847 of the Human Occupation. Final entry. We thought we were conquering them, but they were studying us. We believed their surrender meant victory, but it meant preparation. We assumed our technology made us superior, but they made our technology superior to us. The humans never intended to be our subjects. They intended to be our teachers. And the lesson they taught us is simple: never underestimate a species that has spent its entire existence preparing for war. End log. Outside his window, the capital city of the Vorthak homeworld burned with fires set by weapons of Dominion design, fired by beings the Dominion had thought they owned. The galaxy's greatest military empire had fallen to creatures who turned warfare into entertainment and made strategy their culture. The age of the Vorthak Dominion was over. The age of humanity had begun, and somewhere in the burning city, Krex'tal could swear he heard the sound of human laughter carried on the wind.